Good morning, everyone. And after two speakers like that, I must just, forget it and leave it. I was frantically searching now on my cell phone, 26 May, 26 May, 26. The only thing I can say about 26 May is you're all here now in the present. Madam Minister, thank you for being with us. It's very important for us. And for those of you who don't know the minister, and I don't pretend to know the minister very well, but the minister has followed the RFA for a number of years. And maybe what I can do is talk about something that happened just before the 26th of May, 2023. Our minister is a unique person, because I don't know if anybody realized what happened, but for the first time in as long as I've been involved in transport, and I worked in the Department of Transport. I started my career there when the minister was a guy called Piet Welgemoed. And we used to know that minister as Piet Boelbaal. And those of you who might have worked with him, Don, you remember Piet Welgemoed? Big fellow. And he had one conviction. You might remember me telling the story, Madam Minister. He believed bull bars killed people. And he didn't want to see a bull bar on anything. In those days, the only things we had were 6-liter Cortina bakkies. 3 liters under the hood, 2 liters of Coke under the passenger seat, and 1 liter of brandy under the driver's seat. And he didn't want to see bull bars on the bakkies. He didn't want to see them on bicycles or trucks or nothing. And he believed if you removed all the bull bars off the cars, there would be no deaths. And so we used to go around the department calling him Piet Boelbaal. So I've served or been in transport since Piet Boelbaal all the way to have the pleasure today to have our current minister. And the current minister is the first time that a previous minister has been followed up by a deputy minister. Maybe those are the little torpedoes. I need to underline that because for the first time we don't have somebody, with all due respect to the people who filled that post before, who's come in and first has to learn about transport, has to understand some of the things. Here we have somebody who's been a deputy minister twice, under Minister De Boer Peters and under Minister Fikile Mbalula. It's very important. You'll recall a couple of years ago, and my memory's starting to fade on a number of things, that the minister was at one of our AGMs in Isando. We had it at the Garden Court. And what struck me about Minister Chikunga was she came to me and said, teach me. I need to know what it is that makes your industry work or not work, what your challenges are. And she said something that a lot of us, kind of look at a person and go, and she said, I will promise you one thing. And we thought, here it comes. Here comes the election promise. She said, I'll promise you one thing, that I will not be able to fix everything. Because some things you can't fix like that. But I will listen to you and I will engage with you. And I had the pleasure of being at the previous minister, Fikile Mbalula's farewell a couple of days ago. And I had the absolute honor to say a couple of words. And one of the things that we all need to remember is the one topic or the one slogan in South Africa, which is South African. You don't find it anywhere else in the world. And that is, we will engage in robust debate. We will debate the issues. And we need to come with the information around those issues, debate it, and collectively come to a decision that will resolve those issues, challenges, call them what you will. So I'm extremely, extremely happy to have you here, Minister, for two reasons. That you are here. It's very important. Secondly, Arend, that's another bottle of whiskey you owe me. There were some bets out, Madam Minister. Right, where are we? Well, there we go. First of all, I would like to thank all the sponsors who've made this available. Sponsors are very, very important. We appreciate every single sponsor, irrespective of how much financially you put in, Because who are the sponsors? They are those service providers. They are those people who interact with our members. We are a membership-based organization. They sell services. They sell support. Very, very important. And the journey that we take in terms of road freight involves you. That's why the Road Freight Association has 3 categories of members. It has operating members, transporters, and then it has the affiliates and the associates who are there. Yes, they sell product, but who are there to ensure that the operating members can do their work. And some of you are key in what you do, and some of you are even more key, depending on how you look at it. Tires, fuel, telematics, OEMs, training in terms of drivers. You are all key to that logistics chain. So, on behalf of the board of the RFA, I'd like to thank you all for believing in us, for staying the journey with us, and keeping that vital support for our members. I'd also like to thank the board. I've got to do a couple of thanks, Madam Minister, otherwise I might be on the street with the board later. Another sign that your board is involved is that of the 19 board members, there are 13 with us today. That's very, very, very important. We went to an SMME symposium a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, and the board members whom you had elected to look after the emerging operators and the SMMEs were all there. And remember, our board members are all business people, irrespective of the size of that business. So publicly, I'd like to thank those board members for taking the time to go there and to listen and to pick up that torch and to want to push and drive that whole program. Very, very important. I'm not going to read through every one of these slides, but what is it that we do? You know that we provide a platform for stakeholders to engage, that we rely on the engagement of members. And as we go forward, and I'm sure the Madam Minister is going to present something, just like we've just seen the employment equity draft proposals going through, the triple BEE, that is now, the council has been formed again. We've waited so long for that to get that going. And it's our members who get involved in that because it is you, it is about you, and it is about getting it right. The threats that we face, which the chairman spoke about, well, for those of you who know, I am what generally people call half German. I'm actually Austrian. So this thing about the Bismarck is somewhat, for me. What is the one lesson that was learned out of that? Was that just because you're big and huge and powerful doesn't mean that combined smaller forces used at the right time, let's say influences, but in the Bismarck scenario, combined forces used at the right time can make huge change. And that's really what it's about. It's really what it's about. So you know what the RFA is? 88% of the RFA are SMMEs. We are not just the big companies, who are very important, but 88% of our transport membership is SMME. And if you look at our board is structured as such that the board represents our membership. And each one of those board directors has one vote. And I'm not going to pick the name of a big member because that would be unfair. But let's call it member ABC Corporation XYZ. Just because they might have 10,000 or 20,000 trucks doesn't mean they have 20,000 votes at the board. As opposed to Gavin Kelly, small transport company, Uno One Truck. Everyone has one vote. That's how the RFA works. Our affiliates and research bodies add all of that information in to support us in terms of when we interact and how we interact. So you remember one of those parts of the Bismarck during last year was the price of tires. Remember how the price of tires skyrocketed? And I mean, trucks don't have tires, do they? One or two. When you've suddenly got 24 tires on your vehicle and the price of tires skyrockets, that's a huge operational cost. And that's where our members, affiliates, and associates come in to help us with that. Madam Minister, we're not for gain. Every single cent that we get comes really from two sources. One is membership fees, and the other is when we do events and we have sponsors and they give us sponsorship money, and we have what we call a surplus, and we use that to drive various programs. So we will have a bit of a surplus from this conference. What do? We run webinars, we do support for SMMEs, we run training programs. We try and the money we get from the TETA augment that, so we make sure that we look at the skills within the industry. We are not the TETA ourselves, but we try and augment that. And we're registered with the Bargaining Council, with the Department of Labour, important things. And that again goes to the most important thing called coordination, cooperation, working together. And that's also, Penwell, what brought the Bismarck down. That the various arms and the various people playing a role all worked together to a common goal. Very important. One of our biggest challenges is finance for SMMEs. And I did a presentation to ABSA where everyone talks about the chicken and the egg. And I said, well, in transport, there's a chicken, egg, and omelette. Because when you go to a bank to get financing, they want proof that you've got a contract. And then somebody else wants proof you've got vehicles before they finance your other vehicles. And then somebody else wants proof that you've actually done something. But you can't do it if you don't have trucks, and you can't go and get trucks if you don't have finance, and nobody wants to give you contracts if you can't prove you've actually done something. So it's one of the biggest challenges that we're going to face. And again, we sent something out from the Department of Small Business Development around financing for members to comment on. And we got that information and those comments from our SMME membership and that interest group and that group of directors who play in that space. So it's important that we talk about that. We're independent. That's also very important. In terms of sustainability, the most important thing for us is that you as our members stay sustainable, because that means we can continue to move what we need to move in the country. And remember, we've been saying clearly that road has a role to play, but importantly, rail has a critical role to play. And it's going to become part of our role to get rail, as I say, to carry the load. We cannot continue doing what we're doing. You know what's happening to the roads. You know what's happening to your own fleets. You know you've got a capacity, and once you get to that capacity, that's it. And from there going forward, it's going to be like going and searching for that Bismarck. You're going to send something out to go look for it. On its own, it's going to get sunk. It's going to get destroyed. So we are going to have to be part of that. And the RFA is part of the Presidential Crisis Committee on the state of logistics in this country. It's something we are going to have to look after. We are going to have to play that game together. Standards are very important. Some of the things we've seen on the roads in the last couple of months, the crashes, the accidents, so some people call them, we call them crashes, the incidents, because of standards. I know all of you meet the standards, the basic standards in terms of the National Road Traffic Act. I know there are many of you who go even further, that you have various SAN standards that you meet, so RTMS, ISO standards. But we're going to need to get that critical mass in this industry to get those standards up to where they should be. We are faced with a second Bismarck, if I might use its sister ship's name, the Tirpitz. One of the biggest challenges that we are not allowed to speak about as an association, which is rates. You all know what's happening out there in terms of those that are undercutting and offering cut rate, very low rates to move goods. And the question always has to be, how do you get to that? What are you not doing? That's what's not being done, including wages and all the various other things. So, standards. I'm not going to read that slide, and these are all available. I want to tell you that we're respected in what we do. The minister doesn't always agree with us, and that's great. Department of Employment and Labour doesn't always agree with us, and that's right. But we are listened to. Our points are taken. So it's important, once again, that you speak to us. We're going into a tough time in terms of labour, and again, when those mandating sessions come, you must be part of it. And if I can just take one step and put a little political hat on my head. We're going into elections in 2024. You cannot complain if you don't cast your vote. You cannot complain if you don't say something when we say to you, what should the increases be? What should the basic conditions of employment in our sector in terms of the general agreement be? As Penwell said, nobody's going to change it for you next year. You're going to change it. You're going to be that force that brings those changes. The RFA sits at various things, wonderful acronyms, NEDLAC, you name it, council. But again, it's what you tell us that's important. And then finally, I want to walk down the route of RTQS. Now, those of you who are 21 years old like I am will remember the previous Road Traffic Act. There was very little control over operators, fleet operators. So we then began to design something to try and deal with the operators. And I say we because it has always been, and Madam Minister, you know I used to work at the Department of Transport. Don't tell them. I used to work at the Department of Transport. And where we are today with the National Road Traffic Act, 93 of 96, was created through robust debate and engagement led by a guy called Jack Webster. None of you guys know who Jack Webster is. Yeah, but you're 95 in the shade. Jack Webster. And Jack Webster had one principle, and with all due respect to the ladies, Jack Webster used to say, when we discussed roadworthiness or we discussed what today is called driver fitness, the skills of the driver, Jack Webster would say, you can't be half pregnant. You either are, or as he used to say, or are not. So you're either roadworthy or you're not. Your drivers either comply or they don't. You either comply with the council and the rates or you don't. There's nothing halfway in between here. RTQS, Minister, is Chapter 6 of the Road Traffic Act. The title is Operator Fitness. A lot of the people sitting around the table here were part of that discussion and development. That is what we need to make sure the provinces drive. And I'm hoping that's this discussion, and we've had lots of discussion with your staff. We've got the legislation. As with everything, we just need to apply it consistently. That everybody plays in the same game with the same rules continuously. It's a nice slide. It was done by my office assistant. I'll get to understand it eventually, but what we are trying to do is break it down into manageable pieces, because there's also that saying, how do you eat an elephant? Piece by piece. And one of the things that's unique about the RFA is that from the very big operators, the corporate operators, who've got people who can sit in the office and work through this and say, now we know what Kelly was talking about here, our SMMEs, that is their vision. But they've got to do it step by step, and it's to break it down and to show this is not a monster, A, and B, is not going to cost you a lot of money, because that is important. We can do this, we can walk the route with you, and that's why we've created those tools to help you through RTQS. RTQS is Road Transport Quality System. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what we do during the year. Come to those events. Speak your mind. Madam Minister, you are also welcome. Come to those events. Listen to what the guys say. Get involved and be the change that you are going to be. Thank you so much for your time.